Welcome to December's Forest Ramble, in which we cover the keeping of clean sheets, defensive deficiencies, worries on the wings and squad strengthening, and a festive look back at some historical highlights. Welcome to December's Forest Ramble, ho ho ho. It's starring me, Rich Ferraro, as Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life. We're going to hear from Baz as Eddie Murphy in Trading Places, Jeremy Davies as Will Ferrell in Elf. The Maradona Midlands is going to be Bruce Willis in Die Hard. And welcome to Steven Toplis, who's Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone. So, hello everyone. It's a funny old time because after a couple of months of consistency and a strong level of performance, Forest have arguably hit a little bit of a rut coming into the festive season. Before we go any further, let's hear from Eddie Murphy and his thoughts on the season so far.
I think it's fair to say that the first month of the season was promising, the second 2 months were good, and then this last few weeks has been a little bit mixed, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of, we're hitting a lull in form.
Yeah. Now, it has to be said as well that if we look back to the days we grew up watching Forest, it's quite normal for Forest to be a bit rubbish in December around Christmas time.
Absolutely, yeah. And then we sort of hit our stride again. Sort of February time has been the tradition.
Yeah, and whether that's, there's no rhyme or reason to that. That's just the way things have gone. But obviously, things are starting to open up a little bit in the Championship. So, at the time of recording, with Leeds having a game in hand, which they're playing Villa, Norwich are now top of the table and 10 points ahead of Forest, who are still in 7th, but with the three teams below, including QPR, creeping up. Do you think Forest are still in a good position to challenge for the playoffs and or automatic promotion?
Yes, but this coming period is going to be vital, and we always say that Christmas is going to be vital, New Year's going to be vital, but we're obviously dipping in form at the moment. It's whether we can hold on and just stay in that pack just outside the playoffs, or whether we slip down below that. If we can grab on with our fingertips and keep the what little momentum we've still got, then I don't see any reason why this side isn't good enough to do really well.
Yeah, the other thing that's noticeable is, from my point of view, I'm thinking that the thing that's disappointing is that we've been very consistent. The Burton Albion match aside, we've been very consistent all the way through until our last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And now we've lost three of the 4 matches we've lost in the league have been at home. QPR did kind of what I expect a lot of teams to do in the second half of the season, which is they came along and they put 9 men behind the ball for the majority of the time and just said, we're going to sit here and be really difficult to break down. And if we get a goal on the break, then we're happy with that. Yeah. I also think that QPR are a good example, and I suspect Preston are a good example of the teams that, if they'd ended up going away with a 0-0, they'd have been delighted with that as well.
Yeah.
So, is there anything that Forest can and should do in order to combat the fact that teams will come and sit back and with 2 solid banks of 4 or 5 at a time?
Well, one thing to note is the dip in form has coincided with us losing 3 of the 4 centre-halves. So the fact that we're losing to the odd goal on the breakaway that's come out of nowhere, I think that's not a coincidence. And if that hadn't happened, we'd have got at least 3 0-0s out of that.
Yeah, and what's interesting there, so for example, Robinson got man of the match against QPR. He had a great match against Derby at centre half. It's not about pointing fingers at individual performances, but the unit looks so much stronger, especially when Dawson's in there.
Absolutely.
Maradona the Midlands. Let's start with where we finished there, Pantilimon. I made the point there that a striker is judged on the goals he scores and not on the overall level of his performance. Are we being unfair on Pantilimon when he's kept 10 clean sheets in the season?
I don't think so. My thoughts on him are that he is probably the weak link in the team. He'll be fine for 90% of the time, but there's just sort of 10% of the time when he just sort of drifts off, either mentally or makes a decision, and then he just sort of gives away a goal. And then also, I've got the feeling with him that he saves the shot he should save, but he doesn't necessarily save the shots he shouldn't save. He doesn't necessarily win you points. He doesn't pull off a blinding save from sort of the top corner or anything.
Stephen, interesting thoughts there. I'm not entirely sure sort of where I stand on that, but I would also say that I don't think that Pantolimon... I think he's saved us more points than he's cost us.
Yeah, he's made some big saves through the season, and there's been moments in games where he's pulled off a save and it's been enough to make the difference between, say, losing the game or drawing it or even winning a game. So, he's making a contribution. The only thing for me with him, his weaknesses are the fact that he isn't the most commanding goalkeeper, and I don't think that gives great confidence to the defence. And we could use a bit more of that from him. The guy's 6'8". He should be big enough and strong enough to command any penalty box that he's in, but he doesn't seem to do that. Either he doesn't want to, or it's just not part of his game. And we've also spoke about his distribution before. I think that could be improved. And that also would give a little bit more confidence and a little bit more assuredness from him to the rest of the team. Okay,
I mean, you touched on sort of the idea of the defence having confidence. Now, again, something we discussed with Baz there was about the balance of the defence when we've been missing. We were missing our three senior defenders, I suppose, and Robinson has been filling in at centre-half to the point whereby he actually continued at centre-half against QPR on merit, I think. But the defensive unit is lacking when we don't have a player with the leadership of Dawson, with the experience of Fox, and occasionally with the calmness of Figueiredo. Discuss.
Well, I think defensively they've not done too badly. Where we've missed Dawson is with his distribution, I think. Bringing the ball out of defence and just having that ability to spray a long ball across field, just get it moving in the right direction, and just having that experience just to keep things calm when things aren't going well. I don't think it's any coincidence that he got injured in the Ipswich game, and then after that we've lost against Preston 1-0 at home and lost against QPR.
I mean,
and not won a game.
I wasn't at the Preston match. But what I would say is that yesterday against QPR, I just found myself really wishing he was there on the pitch, just for his influence as much as his ability. What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, I thought the same, and I looked at that back four, and while Robinson, as you say, deserved to be in there on merit, I don't think he's played too badly when he's been in the centre last couple of games. For me, more so yesterday, in the QPR game, it was apparent that we were missing him at left back. When he's there, he works really well as an outlet. Quite often you'll find that he's the outball, and he will stretch the play a bit more because he's left-footed and he can hug the touchline a bit more. Whereas Yanko, while he was going forward, he always wanted to come in onto his right foot, his stronger right foot, which is okay, but it just contributed to the game becoming compressed in the middle, which played into QPR's hands because they wanted to keep it tight and they wanted to keep it compact and frustrate Forest. And we just didn't have that outlet where you could have Robinson going past a player, putting a ball in, or just staying on his left foot, whipping balls in from the left. So for me, the balance of the team has been affected by Robinson having to move into the centre, which is why Karanka's team selection did surprise me a little bit. You could say those players were there on merit from how well they played at Derby, but you had Figueiredo back in the fold, and you could have just put him in. Heffler was fit. Heffler had to come on in the end. Could have put those two in the middle, and then Robinson back at left back, just so you've got that balance of a settled back four that we know has been effective.
I mean, you talked about team selection there. I mean, the team selection worked well against Derby. in a match where actually Janko's strength and defensive ability was really important. And in that sense, defensively, there was a decent balance at a time when we didn't have any other centre-halves available. Yesterday against QPR, I have to say that I didn't think it quite worked out, although I could see why Karanka made that selection at the back, because Toby and Robinson have got that bit more pace and guile, and Hef, for all his qualities, he's not the most mobile and not the most agile of defenders. And so I think that would probably be why he did it, bearing in mind that QPR were playing with Wells and Easy up front, and then they had Freeman and Sholek on the wings, who are all kind of quite mobile players. So I kind of get why that happened, but I say it was noticeable that in the first half, when they were going forward, they were targeting Janko in that left back position. Certainly, I would also say that Osborne wouldn't have done any better at left back because Sholek was a fairly big lad.
Yeah.
So
the only thing with Osborne there, he would have given you that left-footed balance, where at least going forward, Forest would have had more about them down that left-hand side. And going back to the point there with the necessity of playing the back four that we did at Derby, I think that's because we had to play a more compact game and make it difficult for Derby being the away team. And I would have thought yesterday at home we wouldn't have needed to be quite as defensive, if you like, because QPR were doing that to us. So it was up to us to try and stretch the play and try and open them up a bit more, which we failed to do ultimately.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Maradona in the Midlands, that whole idea about tactics home and away, I don't think it's a coincidence that 3 out of the 4 matches in the league we've lost at home, is it?
Yeah, we are sort of, with the personnel we have and the formation ideally set up to go away from home and play on the counter-attack. I had a thought last night that maybe we can, for the home games, we can maybe take a leaf out of England's book in the summer and play with 3 at the back with one of the fullbacks as the centre-half, because for the vast majority of the time we've got possession against teams like QPR, Preston, Ipswich, and we're not going to base an attacking threat. So you could have maybe one centre-half and Derikwa and jumping Jack Robinson on the left side, and then put the wingers as wing backs. So maybe Cash on one side, Osborne on the other side, and that frees up an extra space in midfield for a creative player. So maybe just have just one sitting player, either Colback or Claudio in there, and have Lolly and Carvalho and Goodura sort of playing as a 3 behind, or maybe even have 2 strikers. It just gives you that extra body up front, that extra bit of width at home to get the balls going. So I don't think we really put that many crosses into the box either, have we, in these games?
Well, I mean, the thing that was, again, so I wasn't at the Preston match, but one thing that I did notice very definitely from a tactical point of view is the way that QPR stifled us by having 8-9 men behind the ball at all times in the first half was that it meant that the fullbacks didn't get forward at all. They barely crossed the halfway line. And so the tactical change that Karanka made, enabled basically the centre-halves to peel a bit more wide, Colback to kind of drop in between them, but that allowed Janko and Derikwa to basically park themselves on the halfway line most of the time, and therefore the width was provided that way. And that was important because the reason that Lolly wasn't very effective yesterday was because he and Osborne on the other side were being pushed to be in more narrow positions, and it made it very, very congested in that position. So the whole sort of idea there of enabling the width, I think is definitely something I would agree with, because that's when Forest are good, is when they can stretch the opposition. Talking about tactics as well, I mean, as I was discussing there with Baz, we do have a problem, which is that I think now that the division is starting to stretch a little bit more, I think any team who are maybe about 5th and below will come to the City Ground and just park the bus. And Forest have struggled a little bit to break that down. What do you think, Stephen?
I agree, and this is something now that the team has got to prepare themselves for the rest of the season, because they are as it stands, one of the better teams in the league, and they're there to be got at. And I can't blame teams for coming to the City Ground and playing that way and parking the bus, but yeah, it's the onus now is on Forest to be more creative and be a bit more inventive. Whether that requires bringing in 2 or 3 new faces and a bit more competition up front and in midfield, I don't know, but we've got to find a way of getting Carvalho on the ball a bit more, Lolly even in more dangerous positions, and maybe it is just we've got to make a few tactical tweaks to get players in better positions where they can hurt the opposition and open them up that little bit more.
Maradona, the Midlands, tactics or personnel?
There's a bit of both. We sort of touched on it earlier in the season where we said a lot of the players are very similar. And we sort of thought that was a good thing at the beginning of the season because it meant we could play this our way, whoever the personnel was. But as the season's gone on, it seems that Karanka's lost faith in players like Diaz and Gonçalves, maybe even Murphy. We've been a bit unlucky with Soudani's injury because I think he would have provided an attacking threat. The players we bring on, the 3 strikers, are all sort of the same. They're sort of big guys who sort of aren't that mobile. I was thinking yesterday that maybe we could bring in Apia more into the team because he's got that little bit of pace, a little bit different body shape to the other guys, just to as a super sub, just to stretch teams late on in games. I've been a bit disappointed that he's not had a chance after the Burton game.
I mean, as I said in the QPR mini match report, I thought that Ansarifard was on a bit of a hiding to nothing in the QPR match because he was brought on to play as a number 10. And when you've got no championship experience, that's a really hard ask. I think that I can maybe see him doing a bit more of a job if he was playing up front. In a similar way to Graben, but without the kind of, maybe less of a fox in the box, but certainly in terms of the movement. And I think Ansarifard he's an athletic guy, so he's got the ability to do that. Whereas Murphy is, I mean, ironically, we say about how he's good at kind of staying as that number 9 and holding the ball up and everything. But he does put himself about, and against QPR, he provided a threat by getting down the channels.
Yeah, and had a decent turn of pace about him as well. He got away from the QPR defenders twice, and on one of those occasions put a dangerous ball in. And I think that might have been the one where Graben almost got his head on it.
Was it a penalty, by the way?
You know, you look at it now and you think he gets a shove in the back. There's something that goes on where the defender eases into him.
I've not seen the replay, but players don't go down like that naturally, if you see what I mean.
And when you've got the ball, you're in front of goal, you've got a goal-scoring chance so clear as that, then, yeah, it does make you wonder if that was a penalty.
Okay, right, so, talking tactics, this is something that Baz and I were talking about actually before the match. He put the theory forward about, is there a danger of Karanka being a little bit Warburton-esque in terms of not having a plan B? Now, certainly against QPR, he threw forward a massive plan B in terms of changing the formation and changing the personnel. But I would actually dispute that anyway, because one of the things that I've liked about Forest when they've been doing well is finding different ways to do well. And that's not necessarily about formation, that's about tactics. And sometimes that does come from personnel. So, for example, alternating Jakob and Gedura according to who the opposition are. It could be to do with who plays in the positions on the wings, whether it's going to be Cash or Osborne, or whether it's going to be Lolly playing on the right or the left. So I think that I'm not concerned about tactics, but you made the point about formation, Maradona, the Midlands. Look, I think we can safely say that Karanka's a 4-2-3-1 guy. In fact, he said that when he first arrived at the club. And I think it's also fair to say that most football fans don't really like 4-2-3-1 because they see it as being overly defensive. But, I don't know, Maradona, the Midlands, have you got any further thoughts on that? In terms of, you mentioned 2 up front, for example, but when we've seen Forest go 2 up front against Preston and QPR, well, Graben just completely disappeared.
Yeah, I think it's 2 up front. It's more sort of just getting bodies into the box at that stage. And we just don't. When we don't play well, we just don't get many players into the box. You see that the best teams are the teams who get loads and loads of players into the box and they get lots of crosses in. It's not just at the highest level, say Man City's or something, but just even at our level, Sheffield United, West Brom, Leeds, you'll notice that they'll just flood the box with players. And I think it just, sometimes with that 4-2-3-1 formation, it just holds back.
That's the same formation as West Brom, and well, maybe not West Brom so much because they've been playing with Rodriguez and what's his face up front, but Gale up front for some of the time. But Leeds, they've been resolutely sticking to 4-2-3-1 all season.
Yeah, but they do get players up front quite quickly. I think just with the players we've got, they're more sort of defensively minded. Even Gajura is sort of he was never sort of the driving, making runs into the box sort of player. No. So his first instant thought is always to sort of put his foot on the ball, have a look around, and see what he can do with it. And it just slows down the game sometimes. I think yesterday it was noticeable that in the first half, especially, there was very little tempo, and that's just such an important part of home game. Just getting the tempo up, getting the short passing going, little triangles around the box, little 1-2s, just getting players running past each other into the spaces. It could just be a bad couple of home games. It could just be a blip. It's too early to say yet, but it's a long term.
Well, and as we mentioned, in this division, it's opening up a little bit now. So I guess a drop in form is maybe a little bit badly timed. But until the last couple of weeks, consistency has been the watchword. I mean, Stephen, I see you've got the results since our last podcast written there. So if we just sort of run through some of those, we started off with a relatively comfortable 2-0 away at Hull, didn't we?
Yeah, and that was against a Hull team struggling towards the bottom of the table, went up there and got the 2-0, and it was a good result. And then we followed that up a few days later with the bonkers game at Aston Villa, where the consistency we had in terms of being quite strong at the back and not giving too much away, that all went out the window.
However, we had resilience, because I couldn't see a Forest, no matter how much of a one-off the match was, I wouldn't have seen a Forest team from the last 5-6 years come back from being 10 men with 20 minutes to go and being 5-4 down to get a result in the last few years. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very, very hopeful after the Villa game, because I thought, OK, we can put the defensive performance down as a blip, as Villa being very good in the night and Forest defence making a few mistakes. But the positive was that we went away and scored 5 goals. And I thought the thing I've been worried about is that apart from Graben, maybe we haven't got enough players to score goals. And then I thought, finally, it's clicked. Mm-hmm. The players understand how to play this system and how to get cash into the goal-scoring positions, Lolly, Carvalho, and it's going to be fine from now on. And then we haven't scored since then, which...
Well,
we've beat
Ipswich. So, routine win against Ipswich.
However, actually a very, very good second goal. A Man City-esque second goal.
Yeah, it was a very good goal.
Now, the thing that's interesting about this, and Radio Nottingham made the point as well, is that earlier in the season, when Karanka had his little moan about the fans, the way Forest scored that goal against Ipswich, the total football goal, was exactly what they were trying to do when the fans were having a moan earlier in the season. It's just that Pantilemon's distribution is so wayward most of the time, it didn't work. This time, he got the ball, and then he put it out to the wing, and it worked, and we were able to come back up the other side. So I think it's really worth mentioning that, you know what, Karanka was right on that one. It may have rubbed people up the wrong way at the time, but he was right. And then since then, we haven't scored a goal, and it's worth mentioning that Hull and Ipswich, let's be honest, not very good, okay? Villa are good, but it was a more open game, and even allowing for a one-off game, it was an open game. Whereas Preston, Derby, QPR, all more solid teams. And in fact, out of those matches, it was Derby the one where we were the most likely, I think, to get a result, because we were able to find a way tactically to get at the heart of the Derby team. And one thing that I really liked in that Derby match was the fact that Carvalho, Lolly and Osborne were harrying the middle of the park so much so that after a very good first half an hour, Huddleston was then marginalised. He was niggling, he was moaning at the ref because he'd been edged out of the game by that line of 3 harrying him all the time. And I think there's something in that in terms of you can go away from home and do that, and that comes back to that idea about what works at home and what doesn't. Is there anything you want to add about the Preston match, Stephen?
The Preston game started with Forest playing decently, actually, and they were almost picking up where they'd left off against Ipswich, in that they had a bit more control of the game and they had some chances, but they didn't take them, and they were punished for it. Bit of a sucker punch goal from Preston, and it was enough for them. Once they got in front, they managed to defend it. Forest were not great in the second half, and they came away with the win, and a little bit demoralising. But then we bounced back at Derby, in that it's a much improved performance in a difficult game away to your rivals, and we could come away disappointed on reflection that we didn't win that, because we had the more clear-cut chances.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I'm just looking at your notepad there, and I'm noticing that you put down the QPR match as a goalless draw. So I don't know if there's some wishful thinking going on there. What I would also say is that actually there's been two bits of fallout. So obviously Michael Dawson getting injured, and we discussed that, and we may well come back to that a little bit later. But the Villa match, I can see why in an away match that Toby got sent off. I don't see why Forest didn't. Well, I do see why Forest didn't appeal it, but I do think it would have been worth an appeal, because we've missed Toby for those 3 games that he was suspended.
Yeah, and look at the Derby game and the red cards that I think should have been given.
Well, you compare Toby's tackle at Villa to Tamori's 2-footer, which didn't even have a free kick given against it, and
it was very harsh. It wasn't with 2 feet. It wasn't over the ball. It was just very, very harsh. It was a yellow card at worst.
Yeah,
and so when you get in a decision like that, hopefully they do even out over the season. Didn't quite happen for us at Derby. If they'd have gone down to 10, we might have been able to go on and win the game. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Ifs and buts, though.
Ifs and buts, but given the injuries, given where the team is at with having to play Robinson in the middle, etc., we have missed Toby, and we could have done with him for this run of games.
Right. So where we at in terms of, you know that I'm not massively concerned about positions in the table before Christmas time. We're just coming up to Christmas. But where are we at in terms of the teams who are at the top?
Well, it's 7th in the Championship, but 3 points now off the playoffs after yesterday. So Sheffield United are 6th, with 3 points behind them, with 10 points off the automatic spots. Leeds haven't played their game in hand yet, so that might increase. But
yeah. I would also point out that if Roof's handball in the match against us had been spotted, then that would be another couple of points. Now, I'm not concerned about that right now, but at the end of the season, in a tight division, you never know what impact that's going to have.
Exactly. So, but I look at it also, it's been a bit disappointing of late, but then at the start of the season, if you'd have offered Forest fans the opportunity to be 7th at Christmas, on the verge of the playoffs after 23 games, we'd have all taken it. So, the last couple of games have been disappointing, and it perhaps puts a slightly more negative spin on our position, given that we could be so much better off had those results not gone the way they had. But overall, we're in a decent position going into the new year, and with a view to strengthening in January.
The Forest Ramble Christmas Sketch by Jeremy Davies. The busy festive football schedule is one of English football's grand traditions, up there with meat pies, Bovril, and chanting abuse at referees. It's often held up by Spanish and German football experts as being the major factor in stopping the England team from doing anything good, such as, for example, making it to the semi-finals of major international tournaments. Of course, Christmas footy ain't what it used to be, in these days of pampered players and bowling green under soil heated pitches. No more ice rinks, no more orange balls. We don't even have orange managers since Big Ron called it a day, but we'll just have to hope that President Trump decides to give football management a go when he jacks in the White House. I guess his team would be good at defending set pieces, given how much he likes building walls. Another Christmas tradition in this country, of course, is moaning about the festive telly, and in particular the number of repeats. So, in the spirit of the season, we thought it might be fun to think about matches from Forest history we'd like to see reruns of. First up, my own choice, is the 1959 FA Cup final, when Forest triumphed 2-1 over Luton Town, despite losing goalscorer Roy Dwight in the first half with a broken arm, and playing the entire second half with 10 men, this being the era before substitutes. I was at the Cup final in 1991 when Brian Clough missed out on the only domestic trophy he never won, so it would be a fitting tribute to sit through a final that turned out rather better. The highlights can be found on YouTube, in British Pathé black and white with one of those ultra-posh voiceovers from sometime in the 19th century. Look it up, marvel at how the players seem to be running in slow motion. From Forest's glory years under Clough and Taylor, well, there are so many to choose from. The first European Cup final has to be up there, but my first pick would be the famous 4-0 at Old Trafford in the Championship year. On a pitch with more mud than grass, the first 2 goals were really as much about United's defending as about great attacking football. In fact, modern-day Fantasy League managers might even try to claim assists on their behalf. But the third and fourth goals really were special. Archie Gemmell winning the ball, and playing passes with more curl than even his son Scott's hair ever achieved. And I do love watching 1970s goal celebrations, which are so cardboard cut-out it's like they hadn't quite figured out what to do yet. Check out Tony Woodcock's Incredible Hulk pose for each of his goals, sort of like a less stylish Marco Tardelli, who was obviously watching, and pulled it out as inspiration for his 1982 World Cup final charge. The lads at the pod picked some more recent examples. The match with Yeovil that clinched promotion back to the Championship in 2008 was a popular choice. A tense 3-2 home win with cracking goals from Julian Beddett and Chris Commons before Lewis McGugan curled in one of those thunderbolt free kicks that would have had Ronaldo taking notes saw Forest up, with the papers even predicting great things. As The Guardian noted, Forest have the cash to mount an assault on Premier League promotion. 10 years on, we still live in hope. We couldn't ignore the Frank Clark years. The greatest match of that era for me was the win at White Hart Lane in 1994, mainly because I was there with my Tottenham mad friend, and as we all know, football's just so much more fun if you can wallow in someone else's misery. But Collymore didn't score, and I don't really feel that you can consider the very best of that team without a Collymore goal. So we'll go with the 7-1 win at Sheffield Wednesday, Walker, Waddle and all instead. There were some ridiculous goals on a day when nothing Wednesday's defenders tried, be it tackling or standing off, seemed to work. Mr. Steven Toplis went for another away victory, this time the 7-3 win at Leeds in 2012. 4 goals from Gareth McCleary, currently recovering from a broken ankle at Reading, had Leeds boss Neil Warnock shaking his head in disbelief, which is always a treat to see. It wouldn't be Christmas without a weepy. And the 91 Cup final, when Forest lost to Spurs after taking the lead and surviving a penalty, is the perfect choice, replete with a cast of tragic characters, Clough, Walker, Pearce, and of course Gaza. After Mark Crossley took a knock in extra time, playing out of his skin, my dad turned to me and said, "If Spurs are going to score, now's the time." Sure enough, a corner came in, Desi headed into his own net. Ironically, inside the stadium, the goal was credited to Gary Mabbott, who scored his own famous FA Cup final own goal a few years earlier. So, that's a pretty strong lineup of Christmas reruns, and sure beats sitting through Miracle on 34th Street for the 35th time. However, as Joe Kinnear so lucidly observed, we can't dwell on past glories at this club. At Forest, we need to look to the future. At least substitutes are allowed these days, so with that in mind, and after the traumas of the last few games, I'm going to forego pulling any Christmas crackers this week, in the hope that Forest can score a few instead.
Welcome back. I want to talk about the effectiveness of certain players, and we mentioned about missing Michael Dawson's leadership earlier. One of the first things that Karanka did when he had his January transfer window is he pursued Ben Watson to the point whereby his contract at Watford was cancelled and he was able to come to Forest as a free agent. And that put a driving force in the midfield, but also someone who was comfortable being the captain. Now, we've talked about Watson's form this season, but I think we would all agree that Michael Dawson is Mr. Forest. He is, in reality, the kind of the leader of the pack. then the other player who's worn the armband this season is Danny Fox, and although he is vocal as a player, he is experienced. He's not quite up there with the Michael Dawsons of this world, but I think it's been noticeable when Fox and Dawson have been missing that we have that lack of leadership, that soft centre again slightly that maybe we could have been accused of having in the past. Maradona, the Midlands, what do you think? How important is it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that we brought Michael Dawson back to the club for a reason, and it showed when he's played. When he came into the team, when Fox got injured, it coincided with an upturn in our results, and now he's been out of the team. It's coincided with a downturn. He's a quality player and a natural leader. He looked like a leader when he came to the team as a 19-year-old at Forest first and foremost all those years ago. So yeah, it's not surprising that we miss him when he's not playing.
Stephen?
Yeah, he's been crucial for me all season. That leadership and that presence that he brings to the team when he's in there. He is a calming influence. He's been there and done it as a player, and you can see that he brings that little bit of nous and know-how to this team. And Danny Fox does to a degree as well, but yeah, he's a slightly different captain. This is where, though, if we don't have Dawson in the team, where the likes of Colback and probably Jakob have a role to play, because they can command from the midfield with their performances. I think Derby was an example of that. The two of them,
and I think
brilliant.
I think Jakob maybe does that slightly more obviously than Colback. I think Colback's the kind of player who just kind of gets on with his job, and the QPR match was the only time when I've noticed Colback doing the kind of thing that you'd hope your captain does. So when Ebby Easy was coming off very slowly as a substitute, Colback was literally pushing him off the pitch. But the thing is, that's out of frustration rather than kind of his natural tendency. We've had Benny Osborne wearing the armband for the last 3 matches, and a couple of times Lewis Graben's taken the armband. Is that a sign of the fact that we really do need other players to step up in the absence of the natural leaders of Dawson and Fox?
Maybe.
Or is that a sign that maybe this is something that, again, Karanka's going to try and address in January?
I don't know. I think he's just with when Osborne and Graben, it's a mark of respect for them. I think as much as anything else. It's just recognising how long Ben's been at the club and what an important member of the squad he is. Just because he's been out of the team recently, I think he gives him the captain's armband as a slight compensation for that. And Lewis Graben is like a senior figure in the team. He's sort of around 30 years of age now, and he's an important member of the team. So, I mean, you'd hope, and what we spoke about earlier in the season, that we've got several leaders in there now, and they'd all sort of help. It's just disappointing that we just couldn't get the ball over the line yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that was notable is that Karanka, in his post-match interviews, probably, I've heard him angry twice, and once was after the Burton match, and once was yesterday. And, you know, the Burton match, you can kind of draw a line under it because it is a cup competition, and therefore, in the general scheme of things, it would have been good to have a run, but it's not the end of the world. Yesterday, him being angry is because he knows that the league is the bread and butter, and therefore, for him to say that the players weren't at it, that they didn't seem to be, at the level of intensity that was required, they didn't seem to have the level of motivation that was required. I can't imagine that happening with a Michael Dawson in the team. What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, I think.
I should add the suffix there. Of course, Dawson did play against Burton, so maybe I've undone my own argument.
Yeah, I think it does come down to the players, and they do have to motivate themselves. And to me, it was against QPR a bit of a lazy, tired performance. And I don't know if the efforts of Monday night and Derby took it out of the players a little bit, but the players do have to motivate themselves and take responsibility. Somebody's got to step up in a game like that when you haven't got Dawson or whoever on the pitch to give you a bit of a G up. They've got to take responsibility in the right way and take the game by the scruff of the neck, and none of them really did that. you had Guediora trying to play some passes, but even he was guilty of giving it away too much, and he was ineffective for me.
Well, I mean, the thing that was noticeable with Guediora, I mean, this is partly down to QPR obviously having a lead and wanting to protect the lead, partly down to the tactical change in the second half, but also, in the first half, Guediora looked like a player who hadn't played for a few weeks. And in the second half, when he'd had a little bit more time on the ball, he was a little bit more in control, not just in terms of the effectiveness of his passing and the effectiveness of what he's doing with the ball, but also mentally how effective he was there.
And he wasn't the only one. I'm not singling.
No. And I get
just an example. Yeah.
and I get that. At the start of the season, we were a bit critical of Karanka for chopping and changing quite a lot, and in the last couple of months, he's had more or less a settled 13, 14 players that he's choosing from. Are we paying the cost of that in terms of a bit of fatigue?
Maybe. But, I mean, they had a fairly decent break in between games. There was the international break. And between Derby was Monday night and Monday to Saturday. You'd think they'd be able to freshen things up.
But is that where you maybe also look at personnel?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we did think at the beginning of the season that Diaz, Lolly, Osborne, Cash, Gonçalves would be more or less interchangeable. The way, especially Diaz started the season, and he's just dropped off completely. When he does come, he's completely ineffective.
The thing that you liked about Diaz at the start of the season was his work rate and the fact that he was putting himself about a bit. But I just wonder if he's lacking the physical strength to kind of compete at championship level in the position he plays.
Yeah, he just doesn't seem to show the quality that he's got. I mean, in that first West Brom game, he just looked such a good player in that game. And he's not hardly shown that ever since now. He's not a quality on. I mean, the hard work you can maybe forgive him and the physicality, but it's just quality on the ball and doing anything with the ball when he's got it is just...
Is it trying too hard because he has dropped out of being one of the first choice players?
I don't know if he's trying too hard. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's just because he's not playing regularly. Who knows? It could be any number of things. Just maybe it's the physicality of it he's struggling with. Maybe it's because he's on loan and he knows he's not going to last. Maybe it's just
but the thing is, it's on loan with an option, isn't it? So, as is Gonçalves, and so you'd have thought that they'd be wanting to impress all the way through to the end of the season, and maybe they'll get their chance. Who knows? I mean, the other thing that I think is apparent is the fact that Carvalho, as part of his adaptation to the role in the team, he does do. At the start of the season, he was just sitting in the number 10 role and waiting for things to happen around him. You know, the accusation that gets levelled at Mesut Ozil, for example. Whereas now he does put himself about a lot more. And I say, the Derby match was a really good example of that. I'm just wondering, though, that, Lolly, although he was almost the match winner against Derby, he did look a little bit leggy. He definitely looked leggy against QPR. And so you think, well, maybe we just need to kind of, having been absolutely on fire...
And he's also become a well-known man now. So
he's double marks all the time.
Going to target him, yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I thought was interesting about the Karanka interview wasn't necessarily just in itself that he was blaming the players, but the fact that actually this match, if he'd wanted to, he probably could have pointed a finger at the referee to kind of deflect as a deflection tactic, because there was the Carvalho yellow card, which seemed to... I think the ref was the only person in the ground who saw that.
Yeah.
There was... And to me, that was a potential penalty. I don't think it was a penalty, but it was a potential penalty shout for Forest. There was the free kick that led to the QPR goal, which, again, and then there was the potential penalty against for Graben late on in the match. And those are the kinds of things whereby when you're at home... If you're away, you're not surprised by those, but at home, you kind of think. So Karanka could have, if he wanted to, said, I wasn't very impressed with the referee, this, that and the other. Stephen, do you think we can read anything into that? The fact he was so disappointed in the players that he actually blamed them outright?
Yeah, you can't blame the referee for the defeat yesterday because Forest just weren't at it. And, yeah, I think...
But we've seen loads of managers do it.
But... That's up to the individual managers.
I mean, have you ever seen a match which Sam Allardyce, Mark Hughes, Kevin Nolan across the river, where they've lost, where it's actually been anything to do with them or their team? It's always been, well, the referee, the pitch, the weather, the price of fish, whatever.
Yeah. Interesting as well, none of those are in work at the minute, that you mentioned, so maybe that's got something to do with it. But I do like the fact that Karanka hasn't come out and blamed the referee. I did think the referee was poor, and there were times where he was looking for any excuse to give QPR a decision. But Forest were that poor that you can't blame that defeat on the referee. So I'm hoping Karanka's done this to try and get more responsibility from the players, to get a response from them, and give them a bit of a kick.
Also, I think he's got a level of respect from the Forest fans and sort of integrity about him where you wouldn't expect him to complain about referees. He's always pretty honest about the situation.
And he makes a point, doesn't he, of saying there's no excuses.
Yeah, when he says something, you always know what he means, and you always get even if it's a hidden meaning. He's pretty direct like that, and I don't think it's in his style to use deflection tactics.
Yeah, I mean, I would add in there that, and this is something that Paz and I were discussing at length, when was the last time we had a manager where the fans were singing his name regularly? And the last one was probably Stuart Pearce, and obviously there's a really long history of Stuart Pearce being a fan's favourite, but if we take him out of the equation as being a one-off, the last one we could think of, I don't remember people singing Billy Davies's name.
You sing an E-I-E-I-E-I-O song.
Yeah, but that's...
Billy's our king.
Yeah, but it wasn't... That's more of a song about going
when
up.
he wasn't here that we were singing about Billy. We want to have Billy back and shoes off for Billy back and all that. So.
Yeah, but then there was also It Is What It Is with Nottingham Forest, It Is What It Is. So, But, so, there was that. There was...
Sean O'Driscoll, he plays on the floor.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, okay. Sean O'Driscoll. He plays on. I can't remember now.
But that's the thing. It's relatively given the turnover of managers. But we've got we've got the La Bamba song, we've got the Heartbeat song, and so maybe it's just because Aitor Karanka scans nicely into a song. But
Dougie Freedman had the boogie, blame it on the doogie.
Yeah, and then I was thinking back as well. It's like. Charlie and Frank, who needs Mourinho when we've got Frank Barlio? So yeah, there's obviously a thing where sometimes the name just lends itself well, but...
I can't remember any Calderwood chants.
No.
They mention it, and he was the last one to get us promoted in any form, so maybe it is just nice. Karanka has just got that bit of a ring to it. But it's nice to see, isn't it? I think
Maradona in the Midlands has made that point, whereby Karanka kind of... He does command a certain level of respect, and they're not moaning about referees and they're not making excuses. He's treating the fans with a level of respect as well, in terms of saying, look, we know that we're well paid, we know that we are here to do a job, and we're going to try and do it. And if we don't manage to do that, then people expect answers, or people expect a response. So I kind of like that. Two things before we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Number one. Transfer window about to open. Stephen, do you expect any movement in or out?
I think there'll be a few players going. Off the top of my head, the likes of Bridcut, possibly Watson as well. We are well stocked in midfield as it stands, so maybe one or two of those will move on.
Does anyone remember Panos Tassidis?
Well, I've heard that he could be off as well in January. We've not seen much of him.
He's not even made the squad.
No. Did he come on for one game?
I don't think he's even done that. I think he was on the bench.
Yeah. Maybe I'm imagining things, but so maybe he's out the door. I don't think he cost us anything though, because
he was out of contract.
Out of contract, yeah. So
strangely, Olympiacos felt the need to cancel his contract. I don't know what that's about.
No, maybe we can send him back there. Who knows? In that regard, I think there will be a few players leaving.
Ryan Yates will probably go out on loan.
Ryan Yates on loan, yeah, he's not getting any game time, and perhaps he's not quite ready for this Forest team yet. As for people coming in, well, it always helps, I think, in January when you do strengthen, and we're in a position where we can strengthen, and we've got a target to aim for, which is the playoffs, and potentially, if we went on a run, the top 2, but certainly
Okay, so
top 6.
Maradona and the Midlands are saying maybe up front, and in the attacking positions. Which positions would you think about strengthening?
I'm looking based on the last couple of games, looking at a left back, an out and out left back who can cover for Robinson. Because if we do find ourselves in a position a game where Robinson has to move into the centre of defence, or he gets injured, we've seen the effect that has on the team. So it would be good to have a left-footed left back who can come in there and play that position naturally.
That was the other thing that was interesting about Karanka's interview yesterday, is he did point out that actually it has proven to be problematic of playing Benny at left back. So you'd be surprised if you see Benny playing at left back again, unless it's an emergency situation, I suppose. Okay, any other... So maybe up front, maybe left back, anything else?
I mean, I don't think you'll agree with me, but I mean, I think there is room for improvement in the goalkeeping area. It's not a weak link just for us. I think it's a weak link for.
Hey, don't point the finger at me. I'm just here to make an argument.
With Villa, it's a weak link with Villa and Leeds, and they've both been linked with Carl Darlow and one of the Burnley keepers. I mean, Tom Heaton. I think they'd both be an improvement on Quintillimon.
Yeah, certainly. I don't know about Darlow. Even when Darlow was still at Forest, there's always something that didn't quite impress me about him.
It's his hair and tan, I think.
Well,
has he improved as well since he's gone to Newcastle? Really, I've not seen enough of him to suggest that.
Well, yeah. So I guess
he is a Premier League goalkeeper.
If you look at the fact that, he went with Lascelles, and Lascelles has gone from strength to strength to strength, and is lauded by the favourite player of the Newcastle fans. And Darlow hasn't stepped up, really, has he? So, I mean, Heaton would be a good shout. I mean, I saw some people on Twitter saying Fraser Forster, but I mean, I think he's never really recovered from his injury, and that would be the problem with Heaton as well.
Or with that fight he had in Superman 2 with Superman, he's never really recovered from that either.
Wow, quite. So
another name, Ashley Westwood.
To play in goal?
Ashley Westwood, sorry. Kieran Westwood.
Oh, yes.
Forgive me, yeah. At Sheffield Wednesday.
Who apparently doesn't get a match because of his contract.
I think he got back into the team yesterday and had a blinder.
Well, that was the thing.
He'd obviously fallen out with the manager.
Yeah, now they're changing manager. Perhaps he's no longer an option. And Heaton could be the one. I think we could go for a goalkeeper.
Heaton would be a really good option, except for the fact he's on a huge amount of money, but he's also a good leader as well.
Yeah.
And he's still the club captain at Burnley, and he's captained 2 or 3 teams he's played for in the past. So I like that idea. I mean, bottom line is that clearly Karanka rates Pantilimon higher than Steele. So in that case, we need someone who can challenge Pantilimon, if that's the logic, isn't it? Okay. The last thing then is, it's been a funny old year because we've had such a high turnover of players. So just on the basis of players who have played all the way through 2018, not just this season, I came up with a shortlist of about 6 players who would be potential as a player of 2018. And we have Costel Pantilimon, Toby Figueiredo, Ben Osborne, Matty Cash, Joe Lolly and Danny Fox. So Maradona the Midlands, who's your choice out of them?
Out of those, I'd probably say Danny Fox has been the most consistent throughout the year. Lolly's been done well this season. Cash has done well this season. And Osborne's been something in and out of the team a little bit. But yeah, I'd say Danny Fox.
Okay, Stephen?
I would say Joe Lolly.
Mm-hmm.
He's been great this season, but also towards the back end of last season.
Yeah.
After he came in, he was improving and he was becoming more of an influence, and he's carried that on into the new season. So I would go for him.
Okay, well, in that case, as we've got a split there, I think I get the casting vote, and I would agree with you, Stephen, purely because
Typical.
He's improved and improved and improved until the last 2 weeks. I think I would go for Joe Lolly, although I would give honourable mentions to Danny Fox, who would be my number 2, and I also have to say that I really like Toby Figueiredo. I know at the start of the season he had a little dip and was out of the team for a few weeks, but the thing I like about him is he's always so calm, and considering that apparently he didn't speak any English when he came to Forest. You know, the fact that he's actually now playing with a quiet authority at the back of there is really important. But there you go. So we leave you there. We wish you Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Joe Lolly is our player of 2018, and ho ho ho.